Hey YouTube, I'm making this video because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and don't laugh at me for taking this so seriously, but I've been with Apple for a long time. Well, not that long, but in 2008 I got my first iPhone, the iPhone 3G, which was the first day that it came out in Canada, because the first iPhone didn't ever get released in Canada. Um, I went through a lot of trouble to get it. And I waited in line at 3 o'clock or 5:30 in the morning or something like that. And then I got the next phone on launch day, and then I got the next phone on launch day. So I'm sitting with an iPhone 4 currently. I've had it for almost 2 years now because the 4S was not a meaningful upgrade to me because iPhone 4 was already fast, camera was already good. I didn't need a better camera because what am I using that camera for? Nothing really. And I didn't think Siri was worth $800. So, and Rogers was no longer giving me the update. So anyway, that's why I still have an iPhone 4, and I'm still happy with it to the extent that I was before. I'm currently running the iOS 6 beta, and I've been feeling lately like Apple doesn't really care about their users anymore. And this was really exemplified to me in the fact that they removed Google Maps, which has Street View, which has transit directions. They removed, and they have a great library of businesses that Yelp just, it's not the same thing. Like, Yelp has some things, but when you have the Apple Maps app, you have to download and install the Yelp app in order to view the reviews. It's not the same thing as integrated experience with Google Maps. And the fact that Apple removed Google Maps from their phone and instead put their own inferior version of Maps without any option, that kind of just proves to me that Apple doesn't really care about what their users want. It just cares about getting Google off of its phone, off of its devices, right? So they kind of put their own ego over the functionality of the device. I bought this phone with the ability to search for transit directions within Google Maps, and that's one of the things that I use all the time. So this really struck me pretty hard as a user. I bought this phone with the ability to use Street View, which is something that I also use all the time because I have a really shitty sense of direction, and being able to visually find where I'm going is much easier for me than the map, especially when the compass on my iPhone has never worked. Despite having several replacement iPhones, it has never ever worked. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. So yeah, so I feel like that just proves to me that Apple is willing to put their own ego ahead of the functionality of the device, and ahead of preserving the functionality of a device that some people paid $800 for. I think it's ridiculous that they would do that to their customers. And a lot of people can say, oh, well, you can use the Google Maps web app. Yeah, well, that's true, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all, because whenever you see an address in iOS, you can click on it and you can immediately find the directions to that address. You can immediately find transit directions to that address under iOS 5. In iOS 6, you can't do that anymore, and I'm going to have to copy and paste all the addresses into the browser. The Google Maps web app is considerably slower than the actual built-in app, and it's definitely not the same experience at all. So I feel like it's kind of a cop-out to suggest that that's a solution to this problem, because it's not. And, so I started looking at, Wind Mobile, because my Rogers plan is like over $80, and I feel like that's ridiculous. I think Wind Mobile is a much more fair provider. And anyway, so I was looking at their plans, and of course it's going to cost me half as much to be on Wind as it does on Rogers, but Wind only has Android phones. So I'm looking at the 4.1 update, and it has thoroughly impressed me. I mean, Google Now is just incredible. I mean, it's so much faster than Siri, so much better. It knows what you're doing. You can ask it things like, when is the bus coming, and it knows. That's something that iOS doesn't do. And I feel like iOS is starting to cater to one customer, and that customer is not me. That's somebody who, drives a car and, has a family and stuff. They're catering to that customer. Whereas I am, a low-income young person, and I am, I take public transit and all this stuff, and Google understands that type of demographic better than Apple does. And they cater to that a lot better than Apple does. And I feel like Apple is really, really lagging behind. And I was just playing around with a Galaxy Nexus and a Galaxy S3 in the store today, and it's such a different experience. I mean, the ability to have widgets on the screen. I mean, I've used Android before, but using it now is different. I mean, it's come so far in its polish and the execution, and the things that Android has always had now shine brighter than ever because it's on an OS that's actually capable, like iOS has always been, but Android has now caught up, and it just is fantastic. And the way that you can customize it, you can put widgets on the screen that actually allow you to quickly change your settings, which is something that iOS users have been asking Apple for years. Years people have been asking for this from Apple, but Apple just doesn't see the point in putting it there, and they are too prideful to actually include new functionality for their users. They don't want to look like they're copying people, so even though they implemented Notification Center last year, so they're just going to let their users suffer and not include any new useful functionality. And that, to me, just proves that they don't really care anymore. They've lost touch, and iOS 6 is so stale and so boring. There's about 3 new features, and they're terrible. I mean, the new Apple Maps is actually detrimental to the old users because if you're not using a 4S, you don't have the 3D view, you don't get the 3D turn-by-turn, so if you like this shitty 2D turn-by-turn without any voice interaction, well then, it's going to benefit you, but if you don't like that, and you like the transit directions, and you like Street View, well then it's actually a downgrade for you. It is detrimental to you. And that just pisses me off that Apple would do that to their users, and it just, again, it goes to show that they don't really give a shit anymore. And I feel like they've given into all the wrong conventions, and they're not paying attention to the things that people really want. I mean, I never thought that I would have a use for widgets, but seeing, Flipboard, the widget on Android, I mean, it's so... To have the news story right there without having to open the app is a big difference, and I feel like such a failure for not having understood this for so long. And, I never understood the usefulness of widgets on a mobile device, but now I get it. And I'm just so disappointed in Apple with iOS 6. It is such a horribly crippled and small update that it's just pathetic and not even worth your time. It's not even worth downloading 600 megabytes or 800 megabytes or whatever it is to install it. I mean, it's just pathetic at this point. And it's sad that now, when Apple is finally unifying macOS and iOS into the most useful, it's honestly, it's going to sound ridiculous, but it is the most amazing, I mean, interconnectivity between a desktop operating system and a mobile operating system ever, I mean, since ever. So, I mean, Windows Mobile and Windows were never ever like that, although it's yet to be seen what Windows Mobile 8 and Windows Phone 8 will do. And Windows 8 will do. But I'm just like, it's sad that at this point, when it's becoming so good to have an iPhone, when everyone is getting an iPhone and everyone has iMessage, even my grandmother got an iPhone and has iMessage now. I feel like I'm so annoyed with iOS now, and I'm so done with it, and I'm just ready to leave it for good, because Apple is just, they've gone stagnant and they don't care what their users want anymore. You don't know how long I've been waiting for a feature to just quickly change the brightness on the goddamn phone, because the auto brightness is not always the smartest thing, and sometimes you don't want auto brightness. Sometimes you want to manually change it, and some people like to fidget with that shit, and especially when iBooks is buggy and changes the brightness at willy-nilly and then like turns it up and down all over the place. So I mean, I'm just, and the hardware that's being offered on these Android phones, I mean, the screens are just incredible. Like, you can't compare it anymore. With the AMOLED screens that were like 800 by 400, those were shit. And I saw those and I was like, okay, they're brighter, but the accuracy is shit. But the new phones, like the Galaxy Nexus and the Galaxy S3, have amazing screens, and I noticed just from using my PS Vita that the OLED screen is just so much brighter. It just looks so much better in every scenario, and I just wish I could read books on it because it's just amazing. But the blacks are black, and you know, it's just, on iOS the blacks are not black. They're, I don't know what they are, but they're not black. So I'm just like so fed up with iOS that I'm finally considering leaving it, and this to me is a big deal. And I want to know if there's other people who are in this boat, and I want to know if there's people who are going to rub it in my face. I mean, I'm just finally now getting it, why Android is so good. And I feel like it's a culmination of the OS evolving and me seeing how Apple really treats their users and what they really give you in the software is, and how inadequate it is compared to the competition. And they just really don't care. And if they don't care, why should I keep buying their products? Let me know how you feel.